All right, thank you very much for coming. I'm Pablo Endres from 7Shift. I'm part of the CRACoWi consortium. And welcome to our first webinar in this series as part of our CRAcademy or CRA-Academy from the CRACoWi project. The CRACoWi project is an EU funded project with as part of Digital Europe. And yeah, what we are here to do, or part of our mission, is to create the CRACoWi, which is a CRA compliance wizard, to support especially SMEs, but any type of organizations with their compliance journey with the new CRA regulation that is going to kick in this year. For that, and for this first webinar in this series, we have Michael Beine from Bureau Veritas. He has more than 20 years experience in testing, inspection, and certification. He has been working a lot with the CRA, with the RAD, IEC 6443. So he has lots of practical experience. He also, because of his work background, he has lots of experience with the actual certification process, and he has a really close call to the to all these consortium certifications with the ECC. So he has prepared this this first of a series of webinars. And yeah, Michael, welcome, and thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us.
Yes, Pablo, thank you very much for having me here as a speaker, and thanks for the kind introduction. I think there is not much to add to this, and let's dive into the webinar units. So the Cyber Resilience Act is kicking in right now quite heavily and strongly. And as Pablo said, in preparation for this and to create awareness and understanding of the Cyber Resilience Act, I've created a series of 10 training units to explain the Cyber Resilience Act. In the CRAcademy, we will split this into 3 sections. First section is today with the first 3 training units about giving the overview of the Cyber Resilience Act and introduction, looking at the interplay of the Cyber Resilience Act with other regulations in the EU, and importantly, as a foundational or starting point, to see what is in scope and what is out of scope of the Cyber Resilience Act. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. We will take some of those questions in a question and answer session at the end of this webinar, but we will also go through them and make sure that we answer to your questions offline if we get more questions than we can cover in this time. We have about 1 hour time. It's a lot of material, and typically I hear a lot of questions about the Cyber Resilience Act. There's a lot of uncertainty, and I hope I can give some more clarity in some aspects. For sure, I cannot answer all the questions. Some detailed questions are still vague or need some further thinking and development as the implementation of the Cyber Resilience Act takes place step by step. But I also see it's moving quite quickly. Okay, now let's start into the first unit, the overview and introduction of the Cyber Resilience Act. So what is the Cyber Resilience Act? It is a law, a European legislation that is enacted already in 2024, and it does not need to be transposed into national law. It's immediately across the whole European common market, or the whole European Union applicable. And it focuses on products with digital elements. So that is the focus of this regulation. What is a product with digital elements? I will also explain further in the webinar. Just a short intro here. Products with digital elements is everything which has a hardware together with the software. That typically is the digital product, and it can also be software-only products, which is an interesting extension compared to the CE marking, because the compliance story about the Cyber Resilience Act will all be handled under the CE marking, or what is also called the new legislative framework, a framework in Europe to allow market access without CE mark. Many products will be illegal to be sold or placed on the market in the EU common market. And now, in the past, the CE mark has the aspects of health and safety insurance. So products with a CE mark should not harm the user. Looking at the cyber risks, this could also cause harm to the users in the cyberspace. So that is an extension of the scope of the CE mark to also take cybersecurity into the view. And as I said, it's a market entry regulation in Europe. Before products are placed on the market, they need to go through this compliance procedure and ensure that they meet the requirements of cyber resilience. What is the foundational idea or motivation of the EU to do this? Is to increase the resilience of the EU common market against adverse cyber attacks. So the EU legislation has identified that there is a lot of threats to the society, to the EU society, coming through cybersecurity attacks or cyber attacks. There's a whole agenda of regulations to increase the resilience of the EU common market, to make common rules. And one of them is looking at products with digital elements. That is the Cyber Resilience Act. So political intention is clear. It is the overarching market access requirements under the CE marking. It is expected to have a relevance like the GDPR. Also, the GDPR was a broad and innovative regulation, how to regulate privacy, and it has a broad applicability. In a similar broad view, we look at the Cyber Resilience Act to improve the resilience of products with digital elements before they are placed on the market. A key element to achieve this, because there is such a huge and broad portfolio of products, is the risk-based approach. So it's important to look individually at the risk of the individual product, and the manufacturer has the responsibility and the freedom to apply this risk-based approach to identify and implement suitable cybersecurity for the context of the product. If we look at this risk, it is always risk to the user of the product. It's not the risk of the manufacturer that they may get some claims or that they may get into trouble. It is the risk of the users of the product that needs to be taken into account. And then by just looking at the risk, that can be too easy for manufacturers to say, hey, well, I accept all the risk. Cyber Resilience Act is done. This does not work. There is the transparency aspect that the Cyber Resilience Act adds to this. And the one thing is the CE mark. So it needs to be clearly marked on the product, so everybody can immediately see that there is a CE mark on the product. But also there's the mandate for user documentation. So manufacturers need to explain to the user about their risk assumptions that they did in their risk-based approach. For example, a product for home use, a smart TV, for example, may be expected by the manufacturer to always be placed behind a firewall so that it's not immediately exposed to the public internet. But these assumptions, please put your smart TV always behind a firewall, is an assumption that the manufacturer needs to communicate to their users and buyers so that they can make informed decisions. Another aspect of making informed decisions is the requirement of definition of support period. So manufacturers need to inform the user how long they can get security updates for the products. Give a detail here, the law says minimum is 5 years. So the clear expectation is that products with digital elements get software, get security updates free of charge for 5 years. That's quite a difference to what is currently the common practice for many products. The EU also recognized that additional regulation always creates additional effort in the industry. So the EU has a few things, come up with a few things to support the industry to meet this additional regulation. First of all, standardization. The legal language of the Cyber Resilience Act has a certain level of detail, but it's mainly legal language. It is not directly a technical implementation or ready for a technical implementation. So standardization needs to bring this additional level of detail into the game, and that's ongoing. Standardization for the Cyber Resilience Act is on the way. It's quickly moving. For standardization with light speed, it's really fast. I will spend one unit in this whole webinar series on the standardization and the current status and the organization of the standardization. There's also some simplifications being introduced in the legal language for small, medium enterprise to not overload those companies with too much burden. And then there is the funding for the implementation. So EU spends money on implementing this. The CRACoWi is one of the beneficiaries, the consortium is one of the beneficiaries of such funding to be able to develop such material, to develop the training and make this available to the interested audience. So what is the timelines? The CRA clearly defines 2 deadlines. First is 11th of September this year. So this is not so far away, and it talks about reporting actively exploited vulnerabilities. In order to understand what is an actively exploited vulnerability, you should imagine or think about a cyber incident. That means you get information as a manufacturer, you get information that there is an active attack going on through your products, through the products that you supply. If you get aware of this, you need to report this to European agency, ENISA, and to the local organizations, the CSIRTs, in your country of main residence or main activity. The whole thing about this, to know about actively exploited vulnerabilities, is to get a situational awareness in the governmental organizations so that they know where something drastically is happening if they collect all these reports. And the next deadline is 11th of December 2027, so less than 2 years to fully achieve compliance for the products. You need to think about your whole portfolio of products. It's not only 1 or 2 products. Typically, manufacturers have a portfolio of products with digital elements and also need to look into software products that they may place on the market. So by December, all this needs to be implemented. So what are the obligations of the manufacturer? First of all, as I mentioned, the risk-based approach is a key element. Performing such a cybersecurity risk analysis is one of the key elements and one of the starting activities to know further on what features you need to put into your devices for security. Second one is process-oriented. Apply secure development lifecycle. And that is from the starting point of the first product idea to the design phase, development phase, production phase, up to the end of the life of the product. Cybersecurity needs to be integrated into that processes or into that development lifecycle. So apply security development lifecycle is a process-related requirement. Another process-related requirement is to execute a proactive vulnerability handling. So manufacturers need to stay informed about vulnerabilities in their products. They need to have a proactive approach. They cannot just wait for reports of vulnerabilities and say, well, we didn't know because nobody told us. No, they need to do a proactive approach to find and make sure that products placed on the market are placed on the market without known exploitable vulnerabilities. That's one of the key elements in the technical part. But the handling part, vulnerability handling part, is a process requirement. And then, as I also mentioned, provide security updates during the life cycle of the product, minimum 5 years. And the user documentation to instruct the users how to use the products securely. What are the assumptions? What are the best practices to use it? These kind of informations need to be provided to the user. For the compliance part, the CE mark on the product is one element. The underlying next level of detail is the EU Declaration of Conformity. That needs to be prepared and made available for all products with digital elements. And if products already have a CE mark, the additional item will be, or have a declaration, will be the CRA regulation being listed together with the necessary standards, how the compliance was verified. There's a different choices of conformity assessment procedures to go through, from self-assessment through third-party assessment to certification. I will spend one particular unit on this compliance procedures because there's different choices and need some orientation. And then the manufacturer has to draw up technical documentation, further details about the design and making of the product, so that authorities, market surveillance authorities, have a basis to assess the compliance based on this technical documentation. This technical documentation is not necessarily public. It is something that the manufacturer needs to have available and need to give to authorities to verify. And as I said, September this year, there is a reporting obligation of actively exploited vulnerabilities. So this gives an overview of the obligations, activities for manufacturers. There is two other sets which I don't focus here, but just want to mention it verbally. There is also obligations for importers. So if somebody imports products which are manufactured outside of Europe, they kind of inherit these kind of obligations and need to align with the manufacturer who is outside that all this is in place. And also for distributors, that is the third role in the thinking of the CRA, the distributors, retailers who make available products. So they don't change the product, it stays the same, but it will be hand over to the next level and then sometime end at the consumer or at the user. They also have obligations. These are more the due diligence obligations. So in all these roles, this CRA applies. I think it's quite clear that it's quite a broad and big picture. My recommendation of the day is never walk alone. Don't try to do Cyber Resilience Act by yourself. Choose partners and engage. And that's also what we at Bureau Veritas do. We join the CRACoWi consortium as one of the partners, representing the testing, inspection, and certification elements of Cyber Resilience Act, and supporting the implementation of the Cyber Resilience Act with a simple-to-use cyber compliance wizard tool, making sure that also that wizard covers those regulatory and certification aspects. As well as the consortium, we also are active in the standardization. So colleagues of mine attend the CENELEC working groups who develop standards for the Cyber Resilience Act. So that keeps us aware and on top of the discussions that are going on in the standardization. And yes, some of that information also got introduced into this webinar material. And then I would just want to give a quickly highlight of all the chapters that will be presented through the whole webinar. The first one is the introduction and overview. Second one is the interplay with other regulations. Third one is scoping and classification, what products fit are applicable, which maybe have an exemption. Looking into the status of the standardization, how to do the risk analysis and how to apply the risk-based approach. It can give some guidance in unit number 5. Looking into detail of the technical requirements. What are the technical expectations that the Cyber Resilience Act puts into place? Number 7 is the conformity assessment procedures. I mentioned I'm going to explain what are the options, what are the pros and cons to choose the one or the other options. Looking at the rules of CE marking, giving an introduction of what is the framework and the rule set that is out there. There's quite a bit of questions of what is placing on the market, what's about legacy products. All this is has some rules with it, and I'm going into this. The 9th unit is about the vulnerability handling, explaining what are all the inputs, what are the activities inside the vulnerability handling, and what are the outputs of that. And that also includes an outlook into the reporting obligation, how to do this. And finally, we round up this whole thing as presenting actionable steps on the compliance roadmap, how to achieve the 2 deadlines, September this year, December 2027, and to build a full roadmap, which every manufacturer kind of needs to do at the moment to build this roadmap. With each training unit, I try to ask a few questions for yourself to make sure you understand what I'm talking about. So first question is, who is affected by the Cyber Resilience Act? Is it A, the manufacturer? Is it B, the importer and distributor? Or is it C, all of the above? So I see already some of you are answering in the chat. I like that. I can also give the answer to the audience while you are still thinking about it. It is C, all of the above. As explained before, the Cyber Resilience Act looks as obligations or defines obligations for 3 roles. For the manufacturer, that's the biggest part of obligations, but also for importers and distributors, so that all kind of products which are in the which enter the EU common market have the necessary cyber security in place. Looking at the second question, when is the deadline for the CRA? Is it 1st of August 2025? Is it 11th of December 2027? Or is it 11th of September 2026? Yeah, this is a little bit a tricky question because 2 answers are correct, B and C. B, 11th of December 2027 is the final deadline for all aspects of the Cyber Resilience Act. and fully compliance for products. 11th of this September this year is the deadline for the reporting obligation. The A answer, 1st of August 2025, is not about the CRA, it's about the radio equipment directive. So that kept everybody with the radio equipment very busy last year to meet the cybersecurity aspects of the radio equipment directive by 1st of August 2025. I have also shown the overview of the training units. And the third question is a little bit the open question about what is the most interesting training units for you. Also, feel free to enter this information into the chat. This will be most interesting for us or for me to see what are the hot topics that you see as an audience, and that we can focus on this. So thank you very much for the first training unit. I will now start the second training unit.
Michael, can you please show this the slide again with the question 3? Or show the list again of the units so that we can get feedback on which are the interesting units? There you go.
Sure, I can do that.
Yeah.
While
there were questions there, and that way we can get feedback.
Yes.
Give them 30 seconds or 1 minute with this slide before we change to the next one.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all for providing the feedback. That will also help us with our planning.
Okay, very good. So next unit number 2 is the interplay with other regulations. So the Cyber Resilience Act is not a law, let's say, but it's integrated into a framework of regulations regarding cyber resilience and cybersecurity. There is, for example, the Cybersecurity Act. At the moment, the Cybersecurity Act is being revised into Cybersecurity Act version number 2. And the idea of the Cybersecurity Act is to establish commonly accepted cybersecurity certification schemes across the European common market. And these cybersecurity certification schemes should be closely aligned with the requirements of the CRA and can be then integrated into the compliance procedures. So by getting a certificate or a certification, it might be easier for manufacturers to show compliance to the Cyber Resilience Act. At the moment, the first identified certification scheme is the EU flavor of the common criteria, EUCC. That's the first result of the Cybersecurity Act. And the revision is now intended to simplify or improve the speed of identifying and recognizing such certification schemes to get more certification schemes relevant for the CRA. Then we have the machine regulation. Machinery can also cause damage or harm, and cybersecurity attacks to machinery could create a risk to this. So in this aspect, the machinery regulation and the Cyber Resilience Act will coexist, and devices or machines may also apply to the Cyber Resilience Act. That is a little different to what we see on the right side, where, for example, medical devices, they have their own cybersecurity aspects already defined in the medical device regulation. So they are kind of exempt from the CRA, where the machinery regulation and CRA coexist for the same device. If we look at the NIS2, NIS2 is about critical infrastructure and operator of critical infrastructure services, or important and critical services. So this is more from an operational point of view. and the regulation applies to them as operators, but operators of critical infrastructure typically use products with digital elements to provide their services. And in case this happens, they can rely on the Cyber Resilience Act to see that if something is compliant to the Cyber Resilience Act and the output of the user documentation is in place, operators of critical infrastructure can make sure that they only use properly CE marked and assessed devices into their critical infrastructure. Then we have the Red DA, and there I have a news of yesterday. With yesterday, the EU cast the Delegate Act to repeal, that's the word, to call back the Red DA cybersecurity requirements by 11th of December 2027. So the CRA will take over all the cybersecurity requirements from the Radio Equipment Directive. At that date, that's all now fixed. The legal procedures are done. And those requirements will go into the CRA and will be taken care of there. Then the Radio Equipment Directive will be still active, but it will again concentrate on radio aspects, not so much on cybersecurity aspects. And we have the GDPR. The GDPR also has some cybersecurity aspects. Protection of data always has a risk from the cyber side, so that cyber criminals will steal the data, will steal personal data. So data processing through equipment or devices with digital products with digital elements need some cybersecurity considerations. And here we have a similar with the NIS2, or critical infrastructure. Here we have the GDPR, which applies to organizations who process personal data, that they can use devices based on Cyber Resilience Act, which are designed for this purpose. And then going around the circle, MDR, I did already, maritime vessels and vehicles, especially the vehicle type approval. All things that are under these regulations do not apply to the Cyber Resilience Act. This is something we will also see in that applicability discussion in the next unit. So this gives an overview of the interplay with other regulations. I also have this in a little bit more detailed written form. And here we see the actual language of the Cyber Resilience Act, where the Cyber Resilience Act does not apply. There is a certain list of regulations listed here. And these numbers are kind of acronym if you're not an expert in the field. So I put here some explanation what it is. Medical device directive, then we have the in vitro diagnostic medical devices. We have the type approval for vehicle components, we have civil aviation, and we have marine equipment. So at the end of this view on how the Cyber Resilience Act interacts with other regulations, a few questions. What will happen with the Radio Equipment Directive? Is it A, Radio Equipment Directive Delegate Act will coexist with Cyber Resilience Act? The Radio Equipment Directive Delegate Act will be repealed when the CRA is applicable. All manufacturers can choose. Okay, that's clearly not a choice of the manufacturer. That is a legal act, a delegate act. And as I said yesterday, it was enacted, the delegate act, to repeal the Radio Equipment Directive, cybersecurity aspects, as soon as the CRA applies on the 11th of December 2027. And that also explains that they will not coexist. There's no coexistence of the red DA cybersecurity aspects with the CRA. But as long as the CRA does not apply, so for right now, the red DA applies. So if you want, I'm developing a new product right now, and you want to place it on the market before December, you need to look at the radio equipment directive. Question number 2, what is exempt from the CRA? Is it A, medical devices and automotive components? Is it B, civil aviation and marine equipment? Or is it C, all of the above? Yeah, that's quite straightforward. As I described before, it is all of the above. All these are type of equipment where the CRA does not apply. And now a more open question to you. Think about your products as a manufacturer and see which regulation from all those that I describe applies to you as a company or to you as your products. Okay, so this was the second unit, explaining the interrelation and interplay with other regulations. Now I'm going to move into the next important topic, the scoping and applicability and classification. Yes?
Yeah, maybe before you move on, just to keep it in context, we had 2 interesting questions here.
Okay, cool.
One is there a relationship between GDPR as it's stated in each product that has to be cyber secure, or has this been relegated? And the second question is there a certain order to the directive, like CRA being subordinate to MR, or so on and so forth? Maybe if you have 2 words about this, and then people still have it in context before we move on.
Yes. So the GDPR applies to organizations. It's more like an organizational requirement for organizations who deal with personal data, and they need to rely on products for this in many cases. And in case products use handle personal data, they need to be designed for it to make it in a secure way so that the personal information is kept confidential. And these confidentiality aspects for products with digital elements is required through the CRA. So that simplifies the life of companies who deal with personal information so that they can rely on the necessary protections from those products with digital elements. So that is the interrelation. There is no priority between these. They help each other, let's say, or manufacture or help companies to deal with each other. The same is with the other regulations with the machinery. It is a side by side. The machinery regulation just points to the CRA and say, okay, if you have machinery with digital elements, make sure you look at the CRA requirements to make it secure. So they live next to each other. The other 3 with the automotive and so on, they are the CRA steps back and say, well, you do your thing. You have the higher requirements and sectoral requirements for automotive components, for marine equipment, for medical devices. The CRA does not need to deal with the same thing. The key idea is that there is no overlap of regulation. I hope I could answer the 2 questions that we had. Very good. So what is in scope? What is out of scope? This is the definition as it is in the Cyber Resilience Act. So this regulation applies to products with digital elements made available on the market where the intended purpose or reasonable foreseeable use is to have a direct or indirect logical or physical data connection to a device or network. It's a very broad and open definition. Clearly, it needs to be said that it applies to smartphone apps, like you see on the left side. Smartphone apps are products with digital elements, and by 2027, they will all have a CE mark when they will be downloaded, when they make available in the European market. That is a transition that we will see. I always get the question: is it the Play Store or the App Store that is responsible for it? I don't think so. I think the developer or manufacturer of the app, the provider of the app, is the one who needs to do the CE marking for it. It's like the distributor and the manufacturer. In this case, the App Store will be the distributor, and the app developer will be the manufacturer. And then I have one example of a product with digital elements, which is out of scope. This calculator is out of scope because it does not have any interface. There's no direct or indirect connection to a device or a network. So this is an extraordinary example of out of scope. The first assumption can always be the device is in scope as soon as it has hardware and software. Again, the same slide as before. I don't need to repeat this. It's also important in the context of in scope or out of scope. Here, I want to present and explain a very important concept of Cyber Resilience Act, to put products into certain categories and classes. The first category is a default category. You will not find the word default category in the Cyber Resilience Act. It just applies to anything which is not in one of the other classes or categories. And the majority of products will be seen as, and yeah, we call it the default category. And like 80 or 90% of products will fall into this. But then the legislation took out a few examples of products which have a higher criticality and which are put into, for example, the important class 1. It's like 19 types of products. Examples of these would be, to understand what it is, biometric readers, the fingerprint reader or the iris scan readers. These biometric readers are put into a particularly important class 1 category. Browsers, password managers. These are examples of software-only products. There is no hardware browser typically. Right? It all is a software thing. Password managers also typically come with are software only. So you see that there are clear examples of software-only products also in those categories. We have SIEM, we have boot managers, we have private key infrastructures, we have VPNs. These are all examples of products with important products. Interesting one is, for example, physical and virtual network interfaces. And here I want to explain another important aspect about this classification or categorization. It relates to the purpose, the key purpose of the device. So it does not mean if you have a network interface with your device, you are immediately class 1, because then almost everything would be class 1. No, it is only for those products which are the network interface. For example, the radio module with the Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. That would be such a network interface, or the cellular interface, or the Ethernet, whatever network interface there will be. There's components which build these network interfaces, and they are in the focus of this. So only if the core functionality or core purpose is in the range of these categories, then the product falls into that category. We have operating systems, routers, modems, microprocessors. Another interesting aspect is the smart home product. Smart home assistants, door locks, but also alarms, toys, and wearables. They are also in the class 1. If we look at, and it is important for your portfolio of products to identify if it is in one of these classes. It could also be in the important class 2, a little bit higher criticality. Hypervisors for container runtime systems, firewalls, intrusion detection and prevention systems, tamper-resistant microprocessors and controllers. So those elements would fall into the important class 2. And then we have critical, the highest class. It's for smart cards, secure elements, smart meter gateways, and hardware devices with security boxes. I think smart cards, secure elements, smart meter gateways, it's all very clear. Hardware devices with security boxes, I got the example of a payment terminal. And so a payment terminal already has a very high security risk, and it may have some physical cybersecurity protection inside with tamper protection. So if somebody opens the thing, it will immediately stop working. It will be able to detect the opening and so on. It will also be physically protected against side channel attacks and so on. These particularly hardened hardware, that is this security boxes. And to really find out what is the correct category for the product, there is a EU implementation regulation explaining in further detail about this. This is quite important because the classification determines the conformity assessment procedure. So depending on this category, there's different choices to go through the conformity. If your product is default, you can do self-assessment, and you can choose your own standards that you want to follow. You need to explain why you think those standards are applicable and cover the aspects of the Cyber Resilience Act, but then you are quite free to choose any standard that fits to your circumstances and to the CRA. If your product falls into important class 1, then you need to follow harmonized standards. So you still can do self-assessment, but you need to follow harmonized standards. If your product falls into important class 2, you need to get notified body, third-party assessment, a type examination certificate. And critical products, they need to go through EU certification. At the moment, there is a EU common criteria certification available to get certified. It's very clear for each category, it's possible to jump into a higher class. So you can also do EU common criteria certification for a default product, but because of the costs and complexity of EUCC or common criteria, you will probably not do it. But this is the consequence of the categorization, the main consequence. What is the assessment to apply? And for every, and this is a little bit a preview into standardization, for every of those type of devices, there will be a vertical, that's what they call the verticals, those types of devices. There will be a vertical harmonized standard for this type of products. That's the way how the standardization is organized, to make specific standards for specific type of products. So they can take already some of the environment and best practices for these type of products into account to do the standardization and define the technical requirements. I see already a lot of questions popping up. Let me first put my questions, and then I'm open to look into the questions from the audience. So first of all, my first question is, what is in scope of the CRA? Is it the calculator? Is a smartphone app in scope? Is it B, or is it C, wooden furniture? Yeah, I think that is quite clear. The calculator is out of scope because it does not have a data interface or data connection to something else. It's just in itself. The smartphone app is software only, but it runs on a device. So yes, it's in scope. And C, wooden furniture, has no digital element if it is only wooden. And there is no digital element in wooden furniture as itself, so it's not in scope. Let's look at the second question. what is not a class in the CRA? If you look at the classification, what does not fit into this? It's a little bit trick question. Is it A, critical? Is it B, important class 1 and class 2? Or is it C, substantial? Yeah, I see a lot of C's, and that is correct. Substantial is a category in the Cybersecurity Act, but is not relevant in the Cyber Resilience Act. The classification is critical, important class 1, and important class 2. And then think about your products, yeah, think about yourself, about the question, which class or which category applies to your product? That is one of the first questions that you need to define on the roadmap, on the compliance roadmap, to do this classification. And as a Bureau Veritas, we help our customers to understand this and yeah, identify the right classification if there is a need of further explanation and further details. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention. These are the 3 units I wanted to present today. And it took a little bit longer than expected. So now we have like 6 minutes for questions. Maybe Pablo, you can pick the most common or most important ones that you see in the chat.
All right. So I think two interesting questions was one related to smart meters, to see into which category that they fall into, if they are, if you know, because in the slides we had smart meter gateways and just smart meters. So to make sure if they are critical or class 1, that'd be the first question.
Okay. My understanding is that they are in the default class. This is really about smart meter gateways. The smart meter gateways provide the connectivity to the outside world of the metering network. If it is just a meter who measures the energy flow, let's say, then this is not a smart meter gateway. But to get the precise definition and how it fits to the individual product, some meters have the integrated gateway function, and then they might still fall into this. I recommend to look into this implementing regulation to make up your mind and find out if your product with the features that it has fits into the smart meter gateway or not. If it's just a meter, I would think it's not.
Okay, very good. There is also a question related to the difference between a self-assessment and the harmonized standards and the relationship between them.
Yes, okay. That is mostly on this slide. So in the default category, self-assessment is possible, and in the important class 1, self-assessment is possible. There is no need to do a third-party assessment. The difference between both is in the default class, the self-assessment can pick any standard out there. There needs to be explanation why it addresses the expectation of the CRA, and that explanation, yeah, can be tricky depending on what standard you pick. But there's no need to explicitly use certain harmonized standards. If you fall into one of those classes, the most straightforward way is to use the harmonized standard, the vertical standard that is defined for that type of product. That's what we call the harmonized standard. And the benefit of harmonized standard is it has the presumption of conformity. So that is, from a legal perspective, giving some further support, assurance that this is a standard that fits to the CRA expectations. That is what a harmonized standard with presumption of conformity says.
Right? So talking about the scope.
Yeah.
Seems like.
All right. So, well, since you were still on this slide, there was a question asking for a clarification about what a third-party assessment would look like, right? You know, the actual implementation.
Yes. So the third-party assessment Okay, yeah, I can explain what the third-party assessment looks like. That's why I put NB, notified body, behind it. It's also called the EU type examination. So that's in the rule set of the CE marking, a defined set. It takes into account the technical documentation. I explained before that manufacturers need to put certain technical documents. It will take into account the technical documentation, and the technical documentation needs to include the risk analysis. The risk analysis will explain what are the how are the requirements of the CRA Annex 1, how they are met and why they are met. And then there will be the standards. And the standards will be used to create a test report to verify that the device follows and implements the expectation of the standard. And together with some additional information, like photographs of the devices from all sides, schematics, architectural diagrams, and so on, the notified body makes up his mind if this product complies to the regulation. It's a quite formal aspect. So the manufacturer supplies all those documents and evidences, including test reports, and then the notified body looks formally at it, makes sure that it fits all together, follows all the rules, and has and then confirms the compliance to the regulation, where a test report confirms the compliance to the standard. So that is, I think, an important aspect to look into. All that needs to come together to get this notified body EU type examination certificate.
Okay, and I think we'll take the last question that we have here. There's a question. Anthony was saying, can you clarify whether the presence of remote access, cloud connectivity, or operator backend integration automatically triggers third-party assessment?
The third-party assessment is based on that classification. So for important class 2, if you are in if your product is important class 2, then third-party assessment through notified body is mandatory. In other cases, if you are important class 1 or default, you have the other assessment choices as well. Features of the product, like this remote access, do not immediately trigger this classification. The classification is based on the core purpose of the device. But if the core purpose of the device fits into this this list here, firewall, intrusion detection prevention system, tamper-resistant microprocessor, hypervisor for container runtime systems, well, then you are in class 2, or your product is in class 2 and needs to follow the notified body assessment. Notified body assessment, though, is always available to everybody. And the benefit is the highest possible assurance that the requirements of the regulation of the CRA are met. That's the benefit of a type examination certificate. And that is not only relevant for surveillance authority. We have many customers who like this to show to their customers that they achieve the latest and greatest and best possible assurance, so that their components are good to go into any kind of other devices.
All right, there is one last follow-up question here on this one, also from Anthony. Say that for the same hardware platform used in different configuration, for example, consumer versus operator managed firmware, could different CRA conformity assessment categories apply? And I think it is kind of I think you kind of answered it in there, right? Because the classification does not necessarily come from how it's operated, it's from the device itself. Correct?
Exactly. Yes. So
Right.
it's by looking at the device, not the use of the device or the environment of use.
In any case, just to do a little bit of self-promotion here for the CRACoWi project, we have a classification tool that we will be publishing this week. So keep our open on our newsletter or on our website or on our socials. And this tool will be completely open, no email, no registration. Oh, sorry, I was speaking to myself. Just a small plug for the CRACoWi project. We are releasing a tool that to be able to do an assessment on the placement of this category called Scope Check that will be available on our website, CRACoWi.eu, probably by the weekend or let's say Monday. That will allow you to do these type of tests and be able to figure out where is your placement in this year and try to figure out what your responsibilities are. And of course, you can always reach out to CRACoWi, to Michael, of course, as an expert in this, to see if you need any additional support for any follow-ups on this. He's more than welcome to help you.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining this webinar. I hope I could bring a little bit more clarity to some of the questions. We will look through the questions in the chat and get back to you if we do not have the answer, the chance to answer all of them right now here. And looking forward to see you in like 4 weeks time for the next units through this webinar.
Exactly, that's just the start of this series of webinars. And on the CRACoWi website, there is also a series of 3 workshop videos covering threat modeling. So if you want to learn more in the next time, when is our next webinar coming up?
In 4 weeks' time, let me just double check the exact date on the calendar. On the 26th of March.
Great, so hope to see you all there. And thanks for coming.